Good morning. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Jocelyn Bell, editor and publisher of Broadview Magazine, at Kedron this morning. Jocelyn, I'm delighted that you could join us this morning and that we can have a conversation about Broadview Magazine.
I'm so happy to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. This is great.
Oh, no, it's absolutely my pleasure. And I have to, we all declare our biases, right? So I've known Jocelyn, I don't know how many years now, but we have worked together and she's edited my material for many years. So it's just a pleasure to be able to have this opportunity to bring her into worship here at Kedron. So we knew Broadview as the United Church Observer. That was sort of, the magazine we knew, and yet it has had to transition. So could you talk to us a bit about why that transition was necessary, just to start off our conversation from the Observer to Broadview, and what makes the two publications quite different?
Yeah, and I just want to share, if people don't know my background, that it was always the Observer for me too. And I grew up, I'm a United Church minister's kid, and we always had the Observer, and I got my start in freelance writing with the Observer. So, I have a lot of feeling of connection about the Observer too. But there was really, kind of two core reasons that we felt that the transition was necessary. And the first one was just the business case. So the Observer was losing a lot of subscribers every year. And when we looked into the numbers, we noticed that they were declining at almost the same rate as United Church membership. We all know the story, United Church membership declining and churches closing and so on. And so we realized that if we continue to rely solely on the membership of the United Church for our audience, that it just wouldn't be able to sustain the publication beyond about 2024. Now, you could have a very small publication and not pay writers very well, but to produce the kind of quality and the kind of journalism that we love to do, we needed a bigger audience to be, or even just a sustainable audience to continue. So that was the kind of the business reasons. But also, equally important, we're not just a bottom line, company. Equally important was our mission. And, a lot of churches ask, what does it mean to be the church in the 21st century? And when you ask that question, it's obviously to serve the membership of the people who come to worship every Sunday, but it's also outreach. It's about, interfaith partnerships, or inviting a nonprofit to use your space, or, just connecting with the community, being the voice for progressive Christianity in the public sphere. And so when we ask ourselves a similar question, what does it mean to be the church magazine in the 21st century? Then, we have kind of similar answers. We want to have stories that are about, we want to serve the members of the United Church, but also serve people who aren't necessarily coming to our churches, and engage them in the conversations about progressive Christianity and, other issues that are important to all of us. So through those two things, we started to develop Broadview, a transition from the Observer to Broadview.
So you have made the transition now, and how's it gone?
It's been quite a blur for the last couple of years. There's a lot of different ways, different metrics that you can use to measure how it's going. Our subscriptions do continue to decline, but not at the same fast rate that they were going when we were the Observer. And that's actually a pretty big win, to kind of grab the reins of subscription decline and pull it back a bit. Donations are going well. Advertising, especially with COVID, has been difficult. And our digital engagements are really growing. So those are some of the metrics that, you can quantify. Anecdotally, lots of people have told us that they love the new magazine, the format, the kinds of stories that we're covering. And then, of course, there's some for whom Broadview isn't the answer, and they've moved on, and that's okay. We expected that. But, the business goal has always been financial sustainability. And at the start of my work, I was very focused on subscriptions, stabilizing subscriptions. But in the 3 years that I've been doing this job, I've kind of come to realize that nobody in the industry, in the magazine industry, is really winning on print subscriptions anymore. It's a tough game. And the way that they are winning is on thinking differently about their business models, thinking about new ways to bring in different kinds of revenue. You might have heard the Toronto Star has announced that it's planning to open a casino to
Yes.
help fund its journalism. So
is that next? Is that next for Broadview?
That's not next for us, but it's like, wow, that's the kind of thing that people that need to do to sustain, quality journalism right now. And so, no, we're not looking at a casino, but I attend a lot of webinars and things to learn about what other organizations are doing, and we take things from there. So it's about always being in transition, really, and always trying new things and experimenting. So, I thought at the start of 2020, I said to people out loud, I wish I'd never said it. I said, we're finally through this transition to Broadview. 2020 is going to be a year where we can,
Sorry.
we can just, relax a little and just put the magazine out, tweak a few things here and there. It's going to be, I was like, oh, thank goodness we got to 2020. We made it. And then, COVID and et cetera. So I think it's really just taught me that we always have to be prepared to be always in transition, always pivoting, always trying things and learning from whatever comes our way. So.
Which sounds a lot like my job right now in terms of ministry at Kedron. And one of the things I just wanted to pursue with you is that, you have a lot of, you've really upped your online content and opportunities. And I was thinking, I just read an article this past week in the Globe from a writer, a woman who runs an online publication in Calgary. And I think of the Tyee, I think of the National Observer. And so we're seeing sort of new journalism arising out of the internet and online. What do you see as sort of the future of online journalism at Broadview?
Yeah, I mean, we're still getting the most revenue of all of our revenue streams from print subscriptions. And the predictions have been out for years. I've been hearing for years that print is dead and dying and so on. I still think that is true eventually, but it's not true yet. So at this time, we're holding on to print because it's still working for us. But yeah, I mean, we need to continue to develop the online. We need to get more sophisticated with some back-end things like search engine optimization and, things that I don't fully understand, but know that we need to do. And so we continue to keep experimenting and developing that and being, so that when it comes to a point where it's obvious that we need to stop print because it's no longer viable, then we're already ready for the next thing. We don't want to have a sudden, oh my gosh, now what do we do? We want to be evolving along and being ready for that as the years go by, for that transition whenever it happens. But it's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen next year. And the one thing that we'll always be committed to, no matter what the vehicle is that we present our content with, is we'll always be committed to quality journalism from a faith-based perspective. And so that's what we do. And that's our reason for getting up in the morning.
Which is an excellent reason. And you referred to it as faith-based, talking about faith-based journalism. Mm-hmm. Some people would suggest, wondering, it used to be the Observer was the United Church Observer. Now it's Broadview and it's different. And there's a separate United Church section. So how can we still feel, speaking just from some of the United Church folk, how can we still feel this is, our magazine?
Yeah, when we transitioned from the Observer to Broadview, we are very conscientious about keeping the same quantity of content from the previous magazine to the new magazine. So actually, the amount of content hasn't changed, and we still put United Church stories on our cover as when warranted, when there's a great big story. We did that twice in the last 12 months. Even with the Observer, we put most of the United Church content into a section that we call the United Church This Month. So actually, the architecture of the magazine isn't very different, and the quantity of United Church content isn't very different. If anything, we're doing more United Church content online than we were before. Mm-hmm. And that's because under my predecessor, the feeling then was that people online wouldn't be interested in United Church content because the people who were coming to us online weren't United Church. That was the theory, the working theory. When I came in, I said, okay, well, let's look at the numbers on that. And as it turned out, it wasn't accurate. And when we started posting United Church content, we started getting a lot of people clicking, and these are some of our most popular stories. And so, people want that content. I don't think it's necessarily just because they're United Church. I think everybody loves a story of a church doing a great thing in a community, for example. So I hear that from people saying that they don't feel like there's as much content, but I kind of feel the need to counter it to say, actually, I feel like there's just as much, if not more. I've also really, ensured that we have faith content in the magazine, and sometimes that wasn't as present in the Observer in the later years. But we always have 3 features, and one of them will always have a faith component to it. So these are just things that I've tried to do to bring, help United Church people feel like this is still their magazine. But, I also want people who are not United Church to feel like that this is their magazine too. I don't want them to feel like they're reading somebody else's magazine. So,
No,
when somebody comes to me and says, I don't go to the United Church, but I love your magazine, then I think, yeah, that's great. That's pretty neat. So.
It's terrific. And I have to say, as one of the writers, that has certainly been my experience as a writer, that there hasn't been a decline in United Church content or opportunity either. And I think you're right. It is important because it also, I think, this is just, again, my own bias, I just think it helps us tell our story to a broader audience that we didn't have the opportunity to reach before. And again, not dissimilar to my work in the ministry and the work that all, I think, congregations have right now. Mm-hmm. So what do you see as some of the sort of future opportunities and challenges that Broadview is going to be dealing with in the next number of years? I mean, once we get through COVID, and heaven knows that was, all we've done is the dance of adaptation in this past year. And we thought, oh, wow, I can hardly wait till 2020 is over. And then, oh, look, 2021 is Groundhog Day. So this is going to end. The vaccines are starting to roll out. So as we approach the end of the pandemic, sort of what do you see in the next couple of years for Broadview?
One thing that I know that we need to look at really carefully is, going back to a model of, what does a digital subscription look like for us? And it doesn't necessarily mean you give us $30 a month and then we give you an access to some PDF flip book that you can look at online. That's a bit of an older model. But there's all kinds of creative different ideas that people are doing, and we just need to have put some more thought into what makes sense for us, for our audience, and for what we can do. So people are doing memberships, for example, and what would you get with your membership to Broadview? You would get access to speakers, or I'm just kind of making things up, but there's all kinds of different ways to rethink what a digital subscription looks like, and tons of creativity happening out there. And so one of the things that I'd like to do this, starting this year and into next year, is to look very carefully at those models and consider what our next step in our evolution might be.
Now, Broadview is a legacy publication in some ways. And as part of our legacy, there are different ways that we can support it. And what are some of the ways that we as United Church folks can support Broadview?
Yeah. There's obviously subscribing, which lots of members of Kedron do. I know that. There's getting a gift subscription for a friend, making a donation. Those are the kind of financial ways. But if you're already doing one or some of those things, we'd love for you to join our e-newsletter and receive that on Fridays. Join our online reading club that we are now doing. We started it this year. It's an online Zoom event where people come and listen to speakers, subjects from the stories that we've published, and talk about their stories. And that's a really great event. If you follow us online if you're a Facebook or Twitter or Instagram type of person, share that content with your friends if you find that it resonates with you. Those kinds of things help. And just be in touch with us. If you have a story idea or something that you would love to see us cover, let us know. or just drop us a line and tell us what you think of the most recent issue or something you've read, and just engage with us. Those are things that really help to support us.
Terrific. Jocelyn, it's been an absolute pleasure. And again, thank you so much for being part of our worship service today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Bye.